Well, hello. This intro is going to be a little bit shorter because the bulk of the lesson today is a little bit shy of 30 minutes. But we're going to be talking today about food labels and comparing the old food label to the new one and just kind of noting the differences, but then going into some detail about each section and all the nutrients and things that are listed there. So let's just jump into it, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right. We're going to start talking about the old label versus the new label. So first off, you just look at the screen and just look to the right, and the new label seems to just pop off the page a little bit better. I'm not sure if that's just because it's different or the change is really that obvious. But before we leave the old label, I want to stop off at the bottom. So if you look at the bottom left-hand part of your screen, there's some information I always thought was kind of interesting to keep on the label, but they decided to get rid of it. And that's looking at the calories and a few parts of that, total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, etc. So in the previous video that we talked about, we were focusing on the 2,000 calorie day for a person. And you can see there what they've did is they put in 65 grams of total fat. They talked about saturated fat being less than 20 grams of that. Cholesterol is there as well, sodium, and total carbohydrates. We're going to stop off and also talk later, but there's also dietary fiber. The column to the right, 2,500, they're using as another reference for somebody who's just a little bit bigger, who needs to know the larger numbers. What I'm showing here on the screen now is just kind of to go backwards and kind of do a little proof of concept here that when we started out using this spreadsheet from the previous videos, we were talking about how the lightly active person that's 5 foot 5 inches, 145 pounds, was getting around 2,000 calories, and on the screen there is 2,071. So lightly active, if you recall, was somebody who's not going to the gym but doing the normal day's routine, food shopping, going to work, climbing some stairs, things like that. And here the fats, which is lipids, the scientific word, is at 69. So we're pretty close, knowing that we're at 2,071 for the calories, so it's just a smidge higher than 65. And the carbohydrates at 310, and you can see the total carbohydrate is 300 on the bottom left. So that's kind of what I wanted just to make sure we understood, that those numbers are pretty spot on based on the food label. So what's happened since the change over to the new label? Well, they put the servings in a larger, bolder type so you can easily identify what that serving is. And always know that the unit of measure, here it is cup, half cup, those are always going to be words that are pretty standard to somebody and understanding what's in their kitchen. So it would be in cups or ounces. It may be in slice. One slice of this pizza is a portion size, a serving size. And to the right, it's listed in grams. How much does that weigh? They added also to the new food label something quite important, which is the added sugars. Now, what we're talking about here with the added sugars is how many grams of sugar are physically added to the product that don't come with the product to begin with. And I want to stop off and just mention that because you're going to see labels that have sugars in them, and they're naturally occurring. Something really simple would be milk. Lactose is milk sugar. So you're going to see it on a label for milk that had nothing added to it, just from a cow and sent to your home and to your supermarket. But here we're talking about sugars that they added to the ingredient list to make the product sweeter. Now, it's not always done so for the fact of making it sweeter. Sometimes it's there to make it more palatable. So the example I'll give here is that tomatoes are quite acidic, and you will see sugar added to ketchup and to tomato sauce. And people might think, well, they're doing that for nefarious reasons to make it too sweet, to make me to be addicted to it. But it's not actually the case, because without the added sugar cutting down the acidity, it might not be as palatable. You might also see that in cranberry juice. Obviously, lemonade's an easy one to understand, that the sugar is added and it makes it a little bit more palatable. But there is also a nefarious component to this. There's a thing called the bliss factor, which some companies will use sugar and add sugar to the recipe and have taste testers try it out. And until they say, whoa, that's too sweet, then they back it off a little bit. So it's kind of below your threshold of taste, but it's in there for your body to say, wow, I like this better than that. An example I have was there was a bagel company in New York City that would add sugar to the water that they boiled the bagels in, and became very famous. They were, very great bagels. And I kind of realized, well, that's how they seem to get people connected to it. It's that they were putting sugar in the water. Next, we're going to talk about that they changed some of the nutrients at the bottom. So if you see on the left, it was vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. They changed that to be vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. And we'll go into that in more detail in a little while. And the calories were put in a larger type, which is pretty much the main reason why a lot of people look at labels. They want to just know how many calories is in something. I sometimes mention to my clients, my patients that are trying to lose weight, that eating prepackaged food, while it's not the greatest food to have in some situations, it's not bad to start out with the calories from prepackaged food because you'll know for sure what they are. So I'll give an example, like having yogurt or cottage cheese or things of that nature that are prepackaged that you can look at and know, okay, I was trying to lose weight on so many calories, I can just add up these labels and feel really confident. If you make a dish on your own, it's a little bit harder to realize, wow, that little extra oil added 100 calories, or I had a couple extra, half a cup more of the pasta and I didn't realize how many calories that was. But when you have a prepackaged food in the beginning, not the worst thing in the world, because you'll get into the habit of learning what a portion size is and how many calories are truly in something. Next, they updated the daily values. So a couple of these are different from the left. I'm not sure if it's the exact same food item. I believe it is. It's 60 grams, yes. But some of these have been updated, so these percentages have changed a little bit. And what I want to stop off and just show you is that it's a simple way to figure out what the total needed for those nutrients are. So what I'm using here as example, it's the 16% for the added sugars. I want to back off on that. 16%, so 16 over 100 is 16%, equals 8 grams over how many? So we can kind of see that 8 is half of 16, so we kind of can guess the answer is going to be 50. But how do we do that? Well, if you remember, what you want to do is get the x on the left-hand side. So you swap the 16 and the x, and now you want to multiply the 100 times 8. That goes up and crosses over and multiplies. And now you have 800 divided by 16, which is 50. So I wanted to say one more time, the added sugars is a component that we want to keep as low as possible, and we're recommending 50 grams of added sugar to products per day. There's an obesity epidemic, and a lot of it is connected to having all these sugars. People are just kind of addicted to them and have way too many, having sodas and beverages that are full of sugar. That should be reduced. And one final thing, talking about the percentages here, just always know that less than 5% is considered something low in that nutrient. Could be a good thing in some situations, like the cholesterol here is 2%, but greater than 20% is high. So we're kind of getting close to the added sugars being at 16% is kind of getting to that high range. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see with those new vitamins and minerals, they're actually not only putting the percentage, but the actual amounts are declared at the bottom. And lastly, there's a new footnote. It's pretty much the same. They kind of cleaned it up a little bit and talked about how it's used for general nutrition advice. So let's take a look at this nutrition facts label one piece at a time. First off, it's kind of one of the more important takeaways is that here's a serving size. It's a half cup, and we're going to look in a moment at the 110 calories. But above it, notice that there's 2 servings in this container. So if there's 2 servings, it could easily be maybe some sort of ice cream or even a large bag of chips. But you might have 2 portions if you eat the whole bag. So knowing that you would have to double and make these calories 220 calories. So keep that in mind, that servings per container is quite important. So here we're stopping off and just talking about the calories. The previous video we talked about calories and how they're computed. Knowing that somebody needs around 2,000 calories a day, this is a fraction of that. But also remember that running about a mile burns about 100 calories. So eating this product will give you the energy to run and move pretty considerably for about 8 to 10 minutes of running. So that's 110 calories. Now, next on the label, I want to stop off on this fat section. But what I didn't mention earlier is please note that you don't need to understand the entire label. There's just certain components that are there for certain people. So here, if you have any cardiovascular disease, your doctor may ask you to keep total fat under a certain amount, saturated fat under a certain amount. So you can come in here and see those things. The other nutrients down the side there, cholesterol, sodium, etc., are there for people on high cholesterol that need to keep that down, high blood pressure, keep the sodium down. So you don't necessarily need to know all of them, but if you're having a problem, these are the ones you want to focus on. So there's 2 pieces of the fats up there. There's the total fat, and we saw earlier that we had pretty much the correct grams of fat on our spreadsheet. But here now it's talking about saturated fat, and then right below it, trans fat. So what is a saturated fat and why is it so bad for you? And similarly, we're going to talk about trans fats. So the next slides are going to be showing you some scientific graphical images, just a couple of letters and some bars connecting the letters, but it's talking about carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, nothing outrageous. But if you can take a look at the graphic, we're going to be seeing what a saturated fat is. And here it is. So what you're seeing at the bottom, there's some numbers across the top. This saturated fat has 17 carbons going across that middle spine, and every carbon needs 4 bonds to it. So each carbon has 4 little sticks coming out of it, and is connecting to either its partner next door to it or hydrogen above or hydrogen below. That's basically it. It's a long backbone, and every spot is saturated with hydrogen, meaning there's no empty spaces here there's no holes. It is saturated. So picture a sponge. If that middle part, the backbone was a sponge, we have absorbed and saturated that sponge with as many hydrogens as possible. But what if we take away this a couple of hydrogens there? Well, now we still need to make sure that each carbon has those 4 bonds we talked about. So it's going to share 2 in the middle with that equal sign, and then the other 2 around it. So if you can picture in your mind, we have 4 still there. But we have this gap now. Something happened and we took away. Now, I have on the screen, just so you know, there are trans fats, we'll see in a few minutes, but when it looks like this and the hydrogens are missing on the same side of the model, it's called a cis fat, CIS. So just a little trivia there. You can use it on your trivia night at your local pub. But what happens is, this is actually now called oleic acid, and it's an omega-9. We're going to see a couple of different ones in a few minutes, but why is it called an omega-9? Well, the first break, the first place where the double bond appears is after the 9th carbon coming from the left, which is called the omega end. So when you start from that side, that's called the omega end. So this is an omega-9 fatty acid. So now you learned what the omega-9s, and you can guess what omega-3 and omega-6 means, and we'll see that in a few minutes. But here's an omega-9. But what happens now? Because those hydrogens are taken away, it kind of bends a little bit. So the molecule is not as straight and stiff as that saturated fat, which is solid at room temperature. Primarily, it'd be like something that could sit on the countertop and not drip away. But now we're moving into these monounsaturated fats. So right here, since there's one spot that it is has a double bond, this is a monounsaturated fat, and it now bends a little bit. So keep that in your mind's eye there, that it bends a tiny bit. Here we have one that is a polyunsaturated fat, and this one is an omega-3, because that first bond, the only one we care about when we label the omegas and how we label them, is where is that first bond, and that's after the third carbon. So this is an omega-3, but it also breaks at 6 and breaks at 9. And as you get into the polyunsaturated fats, they kind of bend in on each other, on itself. So it's kind of a different thing, and we'll see why that makes a little bit of sense in a minute. Why the polyunsaturated fats are a little bit better for you than better than the saturated fats. Now here's a trans fat, and notice trans, like the transcontinental railroad, going across. So it's missing the hydrogens across one another, and I kind of made it juxtaposed. You can see the 10 through 17 is a little lower. Couldn't really do a good graphic there. But the hydrogens are missing, so it's not fully saturated, but it's a trans fat. And if you can think, it kind of looks like a saturated fat that is still straight. Now, trans fats have been made illegal to use in food products because they're a component of adding to heart disease and problems. So these still occur naturally in some places, but what they would do is they were using these trans fats for hydrogenated oils, making cookies softer and things like that. So it's been a problem, and so much so that they actually made it illegal to have these in food products. But I want to come up with just a couple of ways to walk away from the fat section and just give you a visual on that. This is how saturated fats look. If you can picture that, we showed you the model, and they were all straight. It had a backbone, and it was straight and saturated. Well, this is why it could be solid at room temperature, because they just stack properly. They stack like telephone poles here, and can help or be part of, I want to say help, it'll be part of the clogging of your arteries because it stacks like that. The molecules are like lumber telephone poles. When you get the couple that broke a little bit, the monounsaturated fats, they are kind of like these logs. They're not totally straight, so they actually really can't make that lattice work and be as stiff as the other fats, the saturated fats were. And then lastly, polyunsaturated fats, best image I can get is twigs that are really kind of bent up that are good for you as well. So I just want to leave you with that images. So when you understand now what a saturated fat is, it is saturated with hydrogen, and therefore it is able to stack and create a lattice work of very stiff and solid. Okay, let's stop off at cholesterol. If you remember before, we want less than 300 milligrams of cholesterol, and your body makes all you need. Cholesterol, while people think it is a bad thing, is used in every cell of your human body. It's a stiffener to make the cell walls do what they need to do, but you really don't need any real dietary ones, cholesterol coming in. A little aside is that cholesterol only comes from animal products because it's made in the liver. So when you see a bag of peanuts and it says 0 cholesterol, they didn't do anything special to make them 0 cholesterol. They're not an animal product, so they would not have cholesterol. So be aware of some of the tricks they try to do to make you feel confident in buying their product. Only animal products would have cholesterol in them. Next, we're going to stop off on sodium. And here, sodium, we saw on the label earlier, really we want to have less than 2,400 milligrams of sodium. Anyone who knows the math, that's 2.4 grams of sodium. It's very hard to do with processed foods because as part of the processing is with sodium. So keep an eye on it. It's so easy to just add up your day and have 4,000 milligrams of sodium without even thinking about it. So it's when people are on a low sodium diet, they're really trying hard. It's very difficult without eating very fresh foods that aren't processed to not have that amount of sodium. We'll have probably another video about this, but your sodium, it needs to be low because when more sodium is showing up in your bloodstream, your body adds fluid to kind of make it less dense. If you have a couple of particles of sodium in a small area and you double that amount, well, then your body wants to add that much more fluid to thin it out again, to get the proportion back. Not really the greatest example, but that's what it's trying to do, is keep the proportion of sodium to the fluid equal, and it will put fluid there and raise your blood pressure. So that's really what's happening when your blood pressure is going up. Your body is just trying to keep that sodium proportion correct for your bloodstream. Okay, we're stopping off here at the total carbohydrate. Just bringing up the slide again from earlier that we did have the correct amount. Here is 21 grams. If you do the math, you can see that everything works out with the total grams and everything. The fiber is a component of carbohydrate. And one thing to stop off and mention here is that dietary fiber is incredibly low in the United States. You can see here that at minimum, we're looking at 25 grams and going up to 30 grams, that larger diet. There's actually some other ways to say that women need about 25, men need about 30. But if you look at your products you buy, a lot of them are very low in fiber. It's stripped out a lot of the times to make things a little more palatable, like white pasta, white bread. But if you go to the store and look at the wheat version of it, the brown version, wheat bread versus white bread, or wheat pasta versus white pasta, or different types of potatoes that are higher in fiber, it's so easy to get to where you need, because if you add up the fiber you have in a given day, it's probably around half. And that would be, say, 15. And all you got to do is find the better foods and get the doubling from those foods. You're not eating any more. You're just getting the better foods for yourself. And then we did stop off and talk about those added sugars earlier. That is something we want to keep reduced as low as possible. Okay, we're going to be moving on to the vitamins and minerals that they're kind of promoting here. Here I did the math, or I took them from the requirements. We're looking for 20 micrograms per day of vitamin D, calcium at 1,300 milligrams, iron at 18, and potassium at 4,700. Vitamin D, very important. You do make it on your own. Getting sunlight during the day, your body will produce vitamin D. But it's part of blood pressure regulation, bone growth, as we all know, having vitamin D, calcium balance, and everything you see there, nervous system functions. And on the right, not to read each one individually, but this is where you can get vitamin D from. Moving down, calcium. As we know, calcium is for bone and teeth formation. Very important to have calcium, especially young kids that are growing that need that. But it's also part of hormone secretion, muscle contraction. So a lot of times when people having cramps in the middle of the night, you take a supplement. It may have calcium in it. It may also go with vitamin D for the absorption. And to the right, you can see where that comes from. Obviously, dairy products is one of the bigger ones. Fortified orange juice is what you're seeing it added to, fortified cereals, and then tofu when it's made with a calcium sulfate. Iron, really important. That's why it's here on the bottom of the label. It's for growth and development, energy production. You see people who are lethargic. Sometimes they will go get a test and find out that their iron intake is not where it should be. Red blood cell formation, wound healing, reproduction, a lot of good things. On the right, again, you can see where they're coming from. Eggs, beans, vegetarians are getting it from beans if you're not getting it from meat products, nuts, seeds, soy, etc. And the last one we're stopping off on is the potassium. And I just want to make it clear, if you check out your multivitamin, the potassium is never near 100%. It's kind of a molecule or a mineral that's hard to come by in a vitamin form that's going to be satisfying 100%. Because if you look at it, well, first let's talk about what it's doing for you. It is helping out with your blood pressure regulation. So you see people who have blood pressure issues, they're going to be told lower the sodium, increase the potassium. Carbohydrate metabolism and getting your energy from your carbohydrates. Goes back to fluid balance. That's for the blood pressure. Everything there on the left is pretty much what it does for you. And it can be found in so many items, fruits, juices, some seafood, and some vegetables. But what I did on the upper left here is I just want to show you how to get to that 4,700 milligrams a day. A banana is only about a tenth of that. 8 ounces of orange juice is only about a tenth of that. And even 3 ounces of salmon is not even a tenth. So right there, you're not even at your levels by taking those 3 items, and you think, well, I had a banana today and my orange juice. But 4,700 milligrams is something that is, you need to make a conscious effort to take that much potassium in. So before we leave, I just want to say one thing here. This is from the FDA, which is in charge of the food labels. And what we're going to see in a moment is that the new thing they added, and I think it's very important that they did this, is that when a food item is sold individually, and if it can contain up to at least 200% and up to including 300% of the nutrients, we must have then a second column of data, because it's kind of a single serving bag. You pick up those chips and you may not think it's 2 servings or 2.5 or 300%, 3 times, and you eat the whole bag. So to help combat that, they now have to put on a double column. So let's say, for example, this is just a large bag of chips you might have picked up at the gas station on a road trip. And now you're seeing that the 220 times the 2 servings is 440. And that is really what you're consuming. So you'll really be going down that far right column now and noticing that everything's pretty much doubled. Some of them aren't exactly correct, but that's just the rounding of it. But do know that this is the new number. And it's so easy to have that 440 calories and not think about it. I'll just end with this, that we talked about when somebody has 2,000 calories a day, or in my example I did on the spreadsheet, it was about 2,100. We did, just because the math was fast. We did 500 calories per meal and only 200 calories per snack, 3 snacks. So 500 calories per meal is, whatever this product is, getting very close to being a meal. So having this as a snack is doubling my snack, and it's getting very close to what my meal should be. So that's how those calories can sneak in very quickly. And we said that 3,500 calories is a pound. So if you're over by 100 consistently every day in a 35-day month, to be silly about it, but in 35 days, almost a month, you can put on a pound. And the freshman 15, when people go away to college and in the first year they gain 15 pounds, it's not hard to do by adding in 100 calories here or there every day. And a year later, it becomes 12 to 15 pounds. So I hope you enjoyed this part of the video and found it very informative. It's kind of dry, but again, now that you know a few of the good major takeaways, the total calories and the nutrients and what they're for, especially the fats. I think the fats is an interesting piece that a lot of people don't know about.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, I know it was kind of detailed, but I believe it covers everything we need to talk about with regard to the food labels. As mentioned in the video, it kind of comes on the tail end of calories and how many calories you need to gain or lose weight. So if you'd like, you can go check out those videos. I'll put a link up there. And upcoming videos, we may look to do one more on fats. So you have a little preview into the fats, but then we're going to be talking about the different types of fats, where they're used in your body, talk about some of them having inflammatory properties, some of them having anti-inflammatory properties. So there's a whole lesson being worked on for that. But for today, I want to thank you for taking a look at this video. If you haven't yet done so, please look to subscribe and click the reminder icon. And if you have an opportunity, please check out my Patreon page so I can continue to bring these lessons to you be much appreciated. And as always, thanks for watching.